It was supposed to be just another late night at the office. Two people. Two marriages. One text message that would destroy 4 lives forever. By the time you finish watching the story, you'll have to answer the question they couldn't. When love and loyalty collide, what would you choose? This isn't just another affair story. This is about two good people who made one terrible mistake. Or was it? Their names are Emily and Michael. And 6 months ago, they had everything. Now they have nothing but each other. And they're not even sure they can have that. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let me take you back to where this started. 12 months ago, Emily Patterson, 34 years old, marketing director at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, married for 9 years to Robert, a software engineer who spent more time debugging code than understanding his wife. On paper, Emily had it all. The house in the suburbs with the white picket fence. 2 beautiful kids, 5-year-old Sophie and 4-year-old Jake. A husband who worked hard and came home every night, mostly on time. Date nights on Fridays when they could manage it. Anniversary dinners at the same Italian restaurant where Robert proposed. But here's what nobody tells you about having it all. Sometimes perfect looks a lot like empty. Sometimes the dream you built becomes the prison you can't escape. Emily would wake up at 5:30 every morning, make breakfast for the kids, pack lunches with little notes inside that said "I love you," kiss Robert goodbye as he rushed out the door with his coffee still too hot to drink, and wonder when she became invisible. She couldn't remember the last time Robert looked at her, really looked at her, the way he used to when they were dating in college. Back when he would skip his computer science classes just to watch her perform in the campus theater productions. Back when he knew her favorite flower was peonies, not roses. Back when he remembered that she hated surprises but loved spontaneity. Now, 10 years into their marriage, Robert knew her schedule, her coffee order, her ring size, and absolutely nothing about what kept her awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling wondering if this was all there was to life. Emily had stopped trying to tell him about 6 months before Michael even entered her life. She had tried. God knows she had tried. She had suggested couples therapy, and Robert said they didn't need it because they never fought. She had planned a romantic weekend getaway, and Robert brought his laptop and worked through most of it. She had bought lingerie, and Robert noticed, but seemed more concerned about answering an email from his boss than exploring what was underneath it. The worst part wasn't the rejection. The worst part was that Robert didn't even know he was rejecting her. He thought everything was fine. He thought their marriage was solid because they didn't argue, because the bills were paid, because the kids were happy, because they still had sex once every 2 weeks like clockwork, scheduled around the kids' activities and his project deadlines. Emily felt like she was drowning in a lake while everyone on the shore waved at her thinking she was just swimming. And she smiled and waved back, because what else was she supposed to do? Tell them she was dying inside? Tell them that she felt more alone lying next to her husband every night than she did when she was actually alone? Tell them that she had started taking longer showers just to cry where nobody could hear her? So she did what millions of people do. She pushed it down. She focused on her kids. She threw herself into her work. She convinced herself that this was just what marriage looked like after the honeymoon phase ended. She told herself that passion fades and companionship is what matters. She believed the lie that she was lucky to have a stable, faithful, financially secure husband who didn't drink or gamble or cheat. She believed it right up until the day she met Michael Chin. Michael Thomas, 37 years old, senior project manager at the same tech firm, married to Jennifer for 11 years. No kids by choice, or at least that's what he told people when they asked. The truth was more complicated. Jennifer wanted kids in their 20s. Michael wanted to wait until they were financially stable. Then Jennifer wanted to focus on her career. Then Michael was ready, but Jennifer said the timing wasn't right. Then they both just stopped talking about it because the conversation always ended in an argument neither of them had the energy to finish. Now they were the power couple everyone envied. Both with corner offices on different floors of different companies. Both pulling in 6-figure salaries. both driving luxury cars, both with closets full of designer clothes and a house in the hills with a view of the water. Both successful, both driven, both accomplished, both absolutely, utterly, completely lonely. Michael couldn't remember the last time he and Jennifer had a conversation that wasn't about logistics. What time are you getting home? Did you pay the electric bill? We need to pick up your dry cleaning. Your mother called. We have that charity dinner on Saturday. Don't forget we're meeting the Hendersons for brunch on Sunday. Their marriage had become a business partnership. Efficient, organized, mutually beneficial, and completely devoid of intimacy. They slept in the same bed but on different sides, backs turned to each other, phones charging on their respective nightstands, alarms set for different times. They had separate bathrooms, separate closets, separate bank accounts, separate friend groups, separate lives that occasionally intersected at corporate events and family holidays. Jennifer traveled for work constantly. Miami on Monday, New York on Wednesday, Los Angeles on Friday. Michael stopped asking where she was going because she stopped pretending to care that he asked. They had sex maybe once a month, and it felt more like a chore than a connection, something to check off the list between responding to emails and updating their investment portfolios. Michael had suggested counseling 2 years ago, and Jennifer laughed. She actually laughed and said, "We don't need therapy, we're fine, we're just busy. This is what successful marriages look like." And maybe she was right. Maybe this was what successful marriages looked like. Maybe love wasn't supposed to feel like it did in the movies. Maybe he was being unrealistic expecting fireworks after 11 years. Maybe he should be grateful for a wife who is beautiful, intelligent, ambitious, and independent. Maybe wanting more than that made him selfish. So Michael did what millions of people do. He buried himself in his work. He went to the gym religiously. He played golf on Sundays with clients. He convinced himself that he was content. He told himself that passion was for young people and stability was what mattered at his age. He believed it right up until March 15th, the day Emily Patterson transferred to his department. Michael still remembers every detail of that morning. It was a Tuesday. He was in his office reviewing quarterly projections when his boss knocked and said he was getting a new team member, someone transferring from the Portland branch, sharp as a tack, creative, and exactly what they needed for the upcoming product launch. Her name was Emily Patterson. She would start immediately. Michael barely looked up from his spreadsheet. He had been through this before. New team members came and went. He would welcome her, assign her projects, conduct the standard check-ins, and maintain professional distance like he always did. Then she walked into the conference room for their first team meeting, and everything he thought he knew about himself became a lie. She wasn't wearing anything remarkable. Just a navy blazer, white blouse, simple gold necklace. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Minimal makeup. Professional. Appropriate. Unremarkable in every objective way. But when she smiled and introduced herself, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt seen. Emily had no idea the effect she had on Michael that first day. She was nervous about the transfer, worried about making a good impression, anxious about proving herself in a new department with new colleagues who had already established their rhythms and hierarchies. She had rehearsed her introduction in the car on the way to work. "Hi, I'm Emily Patterson, looking forward to working with all of you." Simple. Professional. Confident. When Michael stood up to welcome her to the team, she noticed two things immediately. First, he had kind eyes. Not friendly in the superficial corporate way, but genuinely kind, the kind of eyes that suggested he actually listened when people talked. Second, he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. She noticed because she noticed everyone's ring situation since her own marriage started feeling like a costume she couldn't take off. She assumed he was divorced or single. She didn't know until 3 weeks later that he was married and just didn't wear his ring because of a supposed metal allergy. That's what he told people. The truth was he had taken it off 2 years ago during a particularly brutal argument with Jennifer and just never put it back on. Jennifer never noticed. That should have told him everything he needed to know about the state of his marriage, but he was excellent at ignoring obvious truths. For the first month, their relationship was entirely professional. Michael assigned Emily to the new product launch campaign. Emily delivered exceptional work ahead of schedule. Michael provided feedback. Emily implemented it. They communicated via email and Slack messages. They had team meetings every Tuesday. They were colleagues. Nothing more. Except that's not entirely true. Because even in those early weeks, there were moments. Small moments that neither of them acknowledged, but both of them felt. The time Emily made a joke during a presentation and Michael was the only one who laughed. The time Michael stayed late to help Emily troubleshoot a technical issue and their hands brushed reaching for the same cable. The time they both showed up to the office kitchen at 6:45 in the morning and made small talk about insomnia while waiting for the coffee to brew. The time Emily mentioned she loved Thai food and 2 days later Michael brought in lunch from the best Thai place in the city because he was ordering anyway and thought she might want some. These moments meant nothing. These moments meant everything. These moments were the foundation of something neither of them intended to build. The shift happened gradually, then suddenly, the way most dangerous things do. It started with work lunches. Michael needed Emily's input on the campaign strategy. It made sense to discuss it over lunch. More efficient than scheduling another conference room meeting. They went to the sandwich place across the street. They talked about brand positioning and target demographics and quarterly goals. They also talked about other things. Where they went to college, what they studied, how they ended up in Seattle, whether they preferred mountains or beaches, if they believed in ghosts, what their favorite childhood memories were. Stupid, meaningless small talk that somehow felt more significant than it should have. The lunches became regular. Every Thursday, then Thursdays and Tuesdays, then 3 times a week, then almost daily. They told themselves it was about work. They told themselves they were building team cohesion. They told themselves it was networking. They were lying. By the end of April, they weren't just having lunch together. They were texting. About work, initially. Michael would send Emily an article about marketing trends. Emily would respond with her thoughts. Then Michael would comment on her thoughts. Then Emily would share something funny that happened with a client. Then Michael would share a story about a ridiculous corporate policy. Then they were texting about things that had nothing to do with work. About the book Emily was reading. About the documentary Michael watched. About the frustrations of Seattle traffic. About their favorite coffee shops. About nothing and everything. The texts started innocuous. They stayed innocuous for weeks. But the frequency increased. Good morning texts. How's your day going texts? Thought you might find this interesting text. Hope you have a good evening texts. The kind of text you send to a friend. Except Michael and Emily weren't friends. They were colleagues. Married colleagues. Married colleagues who were starting to think about each other more than they thought about their spouses. Emily started looking forward to Michael's texts more than she looked forward to going home. She would hear her phone buzz and hope it was him. When it was Robert asking what time she'd be home for dinner, she felt disappointed. When it was Michael sending her a meme about corporate jargon, she felt a flutter in her stomach that she hadn't felt since high school. She knew this was dangerous. She knew she should stop. She knew where this path led. But she didn't stop. Because for the first time in years, she felt alive. For the first time in years, someone was paying attention to her, not as a wife or a mother or an employee, but as Emily. As a person with thoughts and opinions and a sense of humor and a personality that existed outside of her roles and responsibilities. Michael was experiencing the same thing. He would sit in meetings and think about what Emily would say about the absurdity of corporate speak. He would drive home and compose text to her in his head. He would lie in bed next to Jennifer and wonder what Emily was doing, if she was awake too, if she was thinking about him. He knew this was wrong. He knew he was married. He knew Emily was married. He knew this violated every professional boundary that existed. He knew he should stop. But he didn't stop. Because for the first time in years, he felt connected to another human being. For the first time in years, he had conversations that mattered, about ideas and feelings and experiences, not just about schedules and expenses and obligations. It felt like oxygen after years of holding his breath. By May, they had crossed into emotional affair territory, though neither of them would have called it that. They would have said they were friends. Close friends. Work friends. Friends who happened to text constantly and think about each other obsessively and feel a charge of electricity every time they were in the same room. Friends whose spouses had no idea the other person existed. Emily never mentioned Michael to Robert. When Robert asked about her day, she talked about projects and deadlines and difficult clients. She never said, "And I had lunch with my colleague Michael, and we talked for 90 minutes about whether artificial intelligence would eventually replace human creativity." She never said Michael recommended this amazing coffee shop and we stopped there after work and sat in the corner booth until they closed. She never said, "I think I'm developing feelings for someone at work and I don't know what to do about it." She said work was fine. Busy. Stressful. The usual. Robert nodded and went back to his laptop. Michael never mentioned Emily to Jennifer either. When Jennifer bothered to ask about his job during her brief stops at home between business trips, he mentioned team projects and product launches and revenue targets. He never said, "There's this woman on my team who makes me laugh harder than I've laughed in years." He never said, "I can't stop thinking about her, and it's starting to scare me." He never said, "I think I'm falling in love with someone who isn't you, and I don't know when it happened or how to make it stop." He said work was good. Productive. On track. Jennifer barely listened. She was already checking her phone for her next flight time. The first time they acknowledged what was happening between them was June 7th. Emily remembers the date because it was her wedding anniversary. 9 years married to Robert. Robert had forgotten until Emily reminded him that morning. He apologized, said he'd been swamped with a project deadline, promised to make reservations somewhere nice for the weekend. Emily said it was fine. She wasn't even hurt anymore. That was the problem. She had moved past hurt into numb. That night, she and Robert went to the same Italian restaurant where he had proposed. They ordered the same dishes they always ordered. They made the same small talk they always made. Robert gave her a card he had clearly picked up at the drugstore on the way to the restaurant. Emily gave him a watch she had ordered online 3 weeks ago. They toasted to 9 years. They went home. They had obligatory anniversary sex that lasted 12 minutes. Robert fell asleep immediately afterward. Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling absolutely nothing. At 2:15 in the morning, she picked up her phone and texted Michael. "Are you awake?" He responded in 30 seconds. "Yeah, can't sleep. You okay?" She typed and deleted 5 different responses before finally sending, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Michael stared at that text for a full minute. He knew what she was really asking. He knew what he should say. He should say something vague and supportive and appropriate. He should redirect the conversation to something neutral. He should put down his phone and go to sleep and maintain the boundaries that were rapidly disintegrating. Instead, he wrote back every single day. And that was the moment everything changed, because now it wasn't subtext anymore. Now it wasn't unspoken. Now they had acknowledged, however carefully, that something was wrong in their respective marriages. Now they had opened a door that would be almost impossible to close. They texted until 4 in the morning, about their marriages, about their loneliness, about the ways they had tried to fix things and failed, about the guilt they felt for being unhappy when they had so much to be grateful for, about the fear that this was all life had to offer, about the terror of waking up 20 years from now and realizing they had wasted their entire existence being safe instead of being happy. They didn't say, "I'm attracted to you." They didn't say, "I think about you constantly." They didn't say, "I'm falling in love with you." They didn't have to. The subtext was deafening. The next morning, they were both exhausted. They both showed up to work anyway. They saw each other in the hallway and Emily's breath caught, and Michael forgot what he was going to say to the person he was talking to. They didn't speak about the texts. They didn't acknowledge what had happened. They just went to their respective offices and tried to pretend that everything was normal. It wasn't normal. Everything had shifted. The air between them was different now. Charged. Dangerous. Inevitable. 3 days later, Michael asked Emily if she wanted to grab coffee after work. Just coffee. Just two colleagues decompressing after a long week. Emily knew she should say no. She knew coffee after work wasn't about coffee. She knew this was the moment to step back, to establish boundaries, to protect her marriage and her family and her life. She said yes anyway. They went to a coffee shop neither of them had been to before, somewhere across town where they wouldn't run into anyone from work. They ordered lattes and sat in a corner booth and talked about nothing important. The weather, weekend plans, a movie Emily wanted to see, a restaurant Michael had tried. Surface-level conversation that felt anything but surface-level because of what wasn't being said. Then Michael said something that cracked everything open. He said, "I need to tell you something and I need you to be honest with me." Emily's heart was pounding. She knew what was coming. She knew she could stop this. She could make a joke. She could check her phone and say she needed to get home. She could pretend she didn't understand what he was about to say. Instead, she said okay. Michael looked directly at her and said, "Do you feel it too? Or, am I going crazy?" Emily could have lied. She could have said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She could have said we're colleagues and friends, and that's all this is. She could have saved 4 lives right there with one sentence. Instead, she started crying. She sat in that coffee shop booth with tears running down her face and said, "I feel it too. And I'm terrified." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. They sat there for 3 minutes not speaking, just holding hands and crying, and both of them knew that this was more intimate than any physical contact they had ever had with their spouses. This was the moment of true betrayal. Not a kiss. Not sex. This honest, vulnerable, soul-deep connection that neither of them had felt in years. This acknowledgement that they saw each other, really saw each other, and wanted each other. Not just physically, though that was there too, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. They left the coffee shop separately. Emily got in her car and sat there for 20 minutes trying to compose herself before driving home. She walked in at 7:30. Robert was helping Sophie with her homework. Jake was watching cartoons. Everything was exactly as it always was. Robert asked how her day was. Emily said fine. She made dinner. She helped with bedtime routines. She kissed her kids goodnight. She took a shower and cried under the water where nobody could hear her. She got into bed next to Robert, who was already asleep. She lay there in the dark and knew with absolute certainty that her life had just split into before and after. Before Michael. After Michael. Before today. After today. Before she knew what she was missing. After she could never unknow it. Michael went home to an empty house. Jennifer was in San Francisco for a conference. He poured himself a scotch. He poured another. He sat on his couch in the dark and thought about Emily's hand in his. He thought about the way she looked at him. He thought about the fact that he had just told another woman, a married woman, that he had feelings for her. He thought about the fact that he had been married for 11 years and had never felt for his wife what he felt for Emily after 8 weeks. He thought about the fact that he was going to hurt people. A lot of people. And he thought about the fact that he didn't care enough to stop. For 2 weeks after that coffee shop conversation, they tried to maintain distance. They texted less. They avoided being alone together. They kept things professional in meetings. It lasted exactly 14 days. Then there was a conference in Portland, a 3-day marketing conference that the whole team was attending. Emily and Michael would both be there, with hotel rooms, away from their spouses, away from their normal lives, away from the consequences. The conference started on a Wednesday. Emily told Robert it was mandatory for work. Robert barely looked up from his computer when she mentioned it. He said, "Okay, have a good trip. Text me when you land." He didn't ask which hotel she was staying at. He didn't ask who else was going. He didn't ask anything because he trusted her completely and had no reason not to. Michael told Jennifer about the conference during one of their brief phone conversations while she was in Boston. Jennifer said, "That's great, honey. Good for networking. I'll be in Chicago that week anyway." Neither of them noticed or cared that their spouse was leaving town. Emily packed her suitcase and felt like she was packing for something other than a conference. She packed the black dress she never wore because Robert never noticed. She packed the perfume her sister gave her for her birthday that was too expensive for everyday use. She packed lingerie that had been sitting in her drawer unworn for 2 years. She told herself she was just packing nice things for a professional conference. She was lying to herself. Michael packed his suitcase and thought about the fact that he and Emily would be in the same hotel. Different rooms, but the same building. The same floor, maybe. He thought about the hotel bar. He thought about dinner after the conference sessions ended. He thought about the fact that Jennifer wouldn't call because she never called when she was traveling. He thought about the fact that Robert probably wouldn't check in much either because spouses in comfortable marriages don't worry. He thought about the fact that he was about to do something he couldn't take back. He packed anyway. The first day of the conference was normal. Sessions. Networking. Lunch with the team. Dinner with clients. Emily and Michael barely spoke to each other. They were careful. Professional. Appropriate. That night, Emily went to her hotel room on the 6th floor and took off her shoes and sat on the bed and stared at her phone. She could text Michael. She could suggest meeting for a drink. She could take the elevator down to the bar and see if he was there. She could do a lot of things. She did nothing. She ordered room service. She watched television. She called Robert, who answered but sounded distracted. She talked to her kids, who told her about their day at school. She said she loved them. She meant it. She hung up and felt like the worst person in the world. Michael went to his hotel room on the 8th floor and did the same thing. He thought about texting Emily. He thought about going to the bar. He thought about knocking on her door. He did none of those things. He ordered room service. He answered work emails. He called Jennifer, who didn't answer because she was at a dinner event. He left a voicemail. She didn't call back. He went to bed alone and relieved and disappointed in equal measure. The second day of the conference was harder. There was a team dinner that night at a restaurant downtown. The whole team, 8 people including Emily and Michael. They sat at opposite ends of a table. They participated in group conversation. They were normal. After dinner, everyone went back to the hotel. Most people went to their rooms. 2 colleagues went to the hotel bar for a nightcap and invited Emily and Michael to join them. They went. They sat at the bar. They had 1 drink. Then 2. Then the other colleagues said they were heading up and Emily and Michael were alone. They should have left then. They should have said goodnight and gone to their separate rooms and maintained the distance they had been so carefully preserving. Instead, Michael said, "Do you want another drink?" And Emily said yes. They moved to a booth in the corner. They talked about the conference. They talked about work. Then they talked about everything else. About their marriages. About the loneliness. About the moment they realized something was broken. About the ways they had tried to fix it. About the guilt of wanting more. About the fear of settling. About the terror of looking back on their lives with regret. They talked for 3 hours. The bar closed at midnight. The bartender said last call. They paid their tab. They walked to the elevator together. They got in. They stood on opposite sides. They didn't touch. Emily pressed 6. Michael pressed 8. The elevator went up. It stopped at 6. The doors opened. Emily didn't move. She stood there looking at Michael. He was looking back at her. The doors started to close. Emily hit the button to hold them open. She said, "I don't want to go to my room." Michael said, "What do you want?" Emily said, "I want to be with you." Michael said, "If you come to my room, everything changes. We can't take it back." Emily said, "I know. Are you sure?" Emily stepped away from the door and let it close. The elevator went up. It stopped at 8. They both got out. They walked down the hallway to Michael's room. He opened the door. They walked inside. He closed the door. They stood there looking at each other. Then Michael said, "We don't have to do this. We can still walk away." Emily said, "I don't want to walk away. Do you?" Michael said, "No. God help me, no." Then he kissed her. And everything that had been building for 3 months finally happened. What happened in that hotel room that night wasn't just physical, though it was that too. It was the first time in years that either of them had felt truly connected to another person. It was tender and desperate and overwhelming. It was everything their marriages hadn't been in a decade. When it was over, they lay there in the dark and Emily cried. Not because she regretted it. Because she knew that this changed everything. Because she knew that she couldn't unknow what it felt like to be truly wanted. Because she knew that going back to her marriage now would be impossible. Michael held her and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that would make this okay. They had just betrayed their spouses in the most fundamental way. They had just complicated their lives beyond repair. They had just opened a door that would destroy families. And the worst part, the part that made Emily cry harder, was that neither of them wanted to stop. They wanted more. They wanted this. They wanted each other. Consequences be damned. They fell asleep tangled together. Emily woke up at 4 in the morning panicking. She had texts from Robert asking how the conference was going. She had missed 2 calls from him. She had missed the bedtime call with her kids. She carefully extracted herself from Michael's arms and got dressed. Michael woke up.
He said, "Stay."
She said, "I can't. I have to go to my room. People will notice." Michael said, "When can I see you again?" Emily said, "I don't know. This is insane. We can't do this." Michael said, "I know. But we are. Aren't we?" Emily stood at the door.
She should have said no.
She should have said this was a mistake. She should have ended it there. Instead, she said yes.
We are.
Then she went back to her room and took a shower and tried to wash away the guilt and couldn't. The 3rd day of the conference was torture. They had to sit in sessions. They had to act normal. They had to pretend that everything was fine when their entire world had just exploded. They barely looked at each other. When the conference ended that afternoon, everyone headed to the airport. Emily and Michael were on different flights. They said goodbye in the hotel lobby, with the rest of the team watching. Professional handshakes.
See you Monday.
Safe travels. Emily got on her plane and cried in the bathroom. She landed in Seattle and Robert picked her up at the airport with the kids. Sophie and Jake ran to her and hugged her and said they missed her. Robert kissed her cheek and asked how the conference was. Emily said it was good. Productive. She smiled. She hugged her children. She got in the car with her family and felt like she was living a lie. Michael got on his plane and sat in his seat and stared out the window. He landed in Seattle and took an Uber home because Jennifer was still out of town. He walked into his empty house and sat in the dark and thought about Emily. He thought about her constantly now. All the time. Every minute. He was addicted to her. They both knew it. And they both knew that this wasn't going to end well. But they couldn't stop. For the next 4 months, Emily and Michael lived double lives. They became experts at deception. They had systems. Burner phones purchased with cash. Private email accounts. Coded language. They knew which hotels had back entrances. They knew which restaurants were far enough from their neighborhoods to be safe. They knew how to delete text threads and clear browser histories and explain late nights and weekend work emergencies. They got so good at lying that it scared them both. Emily would sit at dinner with Robert and the kids and smile and ask about everyone's day while texting Michael under the table about when they could see each other next. She would help Sophie with homework while planning her next excuse to stay late at the office. She would tuck Jake into bed and read him stories while thinking about the hotel room she and Michael had booked for Thursday night. She was living 2 completely separate lives and the cognitive dissonance was destroying her. But she couldn't stop. Because the hours she spent with Michael were the only hours she felt like herself. The only hours she felt alive. Everything else felt like she was sleepwalking through someone else's existence. Michael was doing the same thing. He would sit across from Jennifer at the rare dinners when they were both in town and make conversation about her latest business trip while thinking about Emily's laugh. He would attend corporate events and networking functions and shake hands and make small talk while counting the hours until he could see her again. He would lie in bed next to Jennifer on the nights she was actually home and feel absolutely nothing while remembering everything he felt when he was with Emily. The guilt was crushing. But not crushing enough to stop. Because stopping would mean going back to the numbness. Back to the loneliness. Back to the slow death of living a life that looked perfect from the outside while feeling empty on the inside. Conference in Dallas? 3-day affair disguised as a business trip. Working late? Hotel room 2 miles from the office. Business dinner? Meeting each other instead. They had it down to a science. Robert never suspected anything. He was too busy with his own work. Too comfortable in the routine of their marriage. Too trusting because Emily had never given him a reason not to trust her. Until now. Jennifer never suspected anything either. She was too busy building her career. Too focused on her next promotion. Too upset to notice that her husband had emotionally checked out years ago and had now physically checked out too. But living a double life takes a toll. By October, Emily was having panic attacks. She would wake up at 3 in the morning, unable to breathe, heart racing, convinced that Robert knew, that someone had seen her and Michael together, that her entire life was about to implode. She started taking anti-anxiety medication. She told Robert it was work stress. He believed her. She started seeing a therapist, but she couldn't tell her therapist the truth. So she talked around it, about feeling unfulfilled, about questioning her choices, about wondering if this was all life had to offer. Her therapist suggested couples counseling. Emily said she'd think about it. She never mentioned it to Robert, because couples counseling would mean confronting the real problem. And the real problem was that she was in love with someone else. Michael started drinking more. Not enough for Jennifer to notice since she was rarely home, but enough that he needed a glass of scotch every night to quiet his mind. Enough that he sometimes had a second glass. Or a third. He knew this was a problem. He knew he was using alcohol to numb the guilt. But the guilt was the only thing reminding him that he was doing something wrong. And if he let go of the guilt completely, what did that make him? The breaking point came on a Tuesday in mid-October. Emily had told Robert she was working late. She was actually meeting Michael at their usual hotel. They had 3 hours. They ordered room service. They talked about running away together. They fantasized about a life where they could be together openly, where they didn't have to hide, where they could wake up next to each other every morning instead of stealing a few hours here and there. It was a beautiful fantasy. It was also a fantasy that would require destroying 2 families. Emily got home at 9:30 that night. She had told Robert she'd be home by 8. She walked in, and Robert was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Emily's blood went cold. Robert said, "Your laptop kept pinging with notifications. I was going to close it, but then I saw the messages." Emily couldn't speak. Robert said, "Who is Michael? And before you lie to me, I want you to know that I read enough to know this isn't just a work colleague." Emily stood there frozen. She could lie. She could say Michael was helping her with a project. She could say the messages were taken out of context. She could say a lot of things. But she was so tired. So tired of lying. So tired of pretending. So tired of living 2 lives. So she sat down at the table across from her husband of 9 years, and she told him the truth. She told him about Michael. She told him about the loneliness. She told him about feeling invisible. She told him about the affair. She didn't tell him every detail, but she told him enough. Robert sat there and listened, and his face went through every emotion.
Shock,
Disbelief. Anger.
pain.
When she finished talking, there was a long silence. Then Robert said, "How long?" Emily said, "For months." Robert said, "Do you love him?" Emily started crying. She said, "I don't know." Robert said, "That's not an answer." Emily said, "Yes, I think I do. But I love you too." Robert laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound. He said, "You don't cheat on people you love." Emily said, "It's not that simple." Robert said, "It actually is that simple. You made a choice. Every time you met him. Every time you lied to me. Every time you came home and kissed our kids goodnight after being with him. You chose him over us. Emily was sobbing now. She said, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I never meant for this to happen. Robert said, but it did happen. And now you have to make another choice. Him or us. Emily said, I need time to think. Robert stood up. He said, no. You don't get time.
You get right now.
This moment. Me or him. Our family or whatever fantasy you've built with this man. Choose. At the exact same moment, Michael was at home with Jennifer. She had come home early from a trip. She was unusually quiet during dinner. After they ate, she said, we need to talk. Michael knew that tone. That tone meant something bad. Jennifer pulled out her phone. She said, I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago. Michael felt his entire world collapse. Jennifer said, I've known something was off for months. You've been distant. Secretive. I thought maybe you were planning to leave me. I thought maybe there was someone else. But I didn't want to accuse you without proof. So, I hired someone to follow you. She pulled up photos on her phone. Michael and Emily walking into a hotel. Michael and Emily having coffee. Michael and Emily in his car. Michael couldn't speak. Jennifer said, who is she? Michael said, her name is Emily.
She works with me.
Jennifer said, are you in love with her? Michael sat there and realized he had two choices. He could lie. He could minimize. He could say it was just physical. He could say it didn't mean anything. He could try to save his marriage. Or he could tell the truth. For the first time in months, he chose the truth. He said, yes. I'm in love with her. Jennifer's face crumpled. She said, how could you? We've been married for 11 years. Michael said, and when was the last time you actually saw me? When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time we were anything other than roommates with joint bank accounts? Jennifer said, so this is my fault? Michael said, no. It's my fault. I'm the one who had the affair. But this marriage has been dead for years and you know it. Jennifer was crying now. She said, so what do you want? Do you want a divorce? Do you want to be with her? Michael said, I don't know what I want. Jennifer said, well, you better figure it out. Because I'm not going to sit here and be your backup plan while you decide if you want your mistress or your wife. Make a choice, Michael.
Right now. Him or me.
The same ultimatum being given in two different houses at the exact same time.
Choose.
Emily sat at her kitchen table looking at Robert and said, I can't choose right now. Robert said, then I'll choose for you. Get out. Emily said, what? Robert said, get out of this house. Tonight. Go to your parents. Go to a hotel. Go to him for all I care. But you don't get to stay here while you figure out if your family is worth keeping. Emily said, please. Robert. The kids. Robert said, the kids are asleep. And you should have thought about the kids before you decided to blow up their lives. Emily stood up. She was shaking. She said, can we please talk about this tomorrow when we've both calmed down? Robert said, there's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now live with it. Emily grabbed her purse and her phone. She walked out to her car. She sat there in the driveway and called Michael. He answered on the first ring. He said, Jennifer knows. Emily said, Robert knows. There was a long pause. Then Michael said, what are we going to do? Emily said, I don't know. Where are you? Michael said, I'm in my car. I couldn't stay in that house. Emily said, me either. Where should we go? Michael said, I don't know. Not a hotel. Not tonight. Emily said, there's a parking garage. Downtown. 3rd level. I'll meet you there. They hung up. They drove separately to the parking garage. They parked next to each other. Emily got into Michael's car. They sat there in the dark. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Emily said, what did Jennifer say? Michael said, she gave me an ultimatum.
Her or you.
What did Robert say? Emily said the same thing. They sat with that. Then Michael said we could run. Emily said, what? Michael said, we could leave. Both of us. Start over somewhere else. Emily said, are you serious? Michael said, I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I love you. I can't go back to that life. That empty, lonely, suffocating life. I'd rather have nothing with you than everything without you. Emily sat there and felt a million things at once. Terror.
Hope. Guilt.
Freedom. She thought about her kids.
Sophie. Jake.
Their little faces. The way they hugged her when she came home. The way they needed her. The way they would be destroyed if she left. She thought about Robert. Faithful, stable, boring Robert who had never done anything to deserve this. She thought about her life. The house. The routine. The safety. The predictability. The slow death of living without passion. Then she thought about Michael. The way he looked at her. The way he made her feel. The way she came alive when she was with him. She thought about the possibility of a different life. A life where she woke up happy. A life where she didn't feel invisible. A life where she was chosen, truly chosen, every single day. She thought about all of it. And then she said, okay. Michael said, okay. Emily said, okay. Let's run. Let's leave. Let's start over. Michael grabbed her hands. He said, are you sure? Emily said, no. I'm not sure about anything. But I'm sure that I can't go back. I'm sure that I love you. I'm sure that I'd rather take a chance on something real than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Michael kissed her. He said, then we're doing this. Emily said, we're doing this. They sat there making plans. They would both quit their jobs. They would find new ones in a different city.
Portland.
Denver. Austin. Somewhere far from Seattle. Emily would file for divorce. Michael would file for divorce. They would figure out custody arrangements. They would build a new life. Together. It felt possible in that moment. Sitting in that dark parking garage at midnight with the man she loved. It felt like the beginning of something instead of the end of everything. But reality has a way of crashing through fantasy. Emily went to a hotel that night. She couldn't go home. She couldn't face Robert. She couldn't face her kids and their questions about why mommy was leaving. She checked into a room and sat on the bed and looked at her phone. 17 missed calls from her mother. 8 missed calls from Robert. 3 texts from her sister. What happened? Robert called. Are you okay? Where are you? She didn't respond to any of them. She opened her photos instead. Picture after picture of Sophie and Jake. Birthday parties. First day of school. Beach vacations. Christmas mornings. Regular Tuesday afternoons. Sophie missing her 2 front teeth. Jake covered in spaghetti sauce. Both of them asleep in the car after a long day. Both of them holding hands walking into school. Both of them looking up at the camera with absolute trust and love and the belief that their mother would always be there. Emily stared at those photos until 3 in the morning, and something inside her cracked. Not because she didn't love Michael.
She did. Desperately. Completely.
But because she realized what running away would actually mean. It would mean Sophie's face when she realized mommy chose a man over her. It would mean Jake asking when mommy was coming home and not understanding why the answer was never. It would mean missing school plays and soccer games and goodnight kisses and all the small moments that made up a childhood. It would mean being the mother who abandoned her children. The woman who chose her own happiness over her kids' stability. The person she swore she would never become. She called Michael at 3:15 in the morning. He answered immediately. He said, "Are you okay?" Emily said, "I can't do it." Michael said, "What?" Emily said, "I can't run away with you. I can't leave my kids." Michael said, "We talked about this. You'd still see them. Custody arrangements. Weekends. We'd make it work." Emily was crying. She said, "It's not the same. They need me. They need their mother. Not weekend visits. Not phone calls. They need me there. Every day. Every night." Michael said, "What about what you need? Don't you deserve to be happy?" Emily said, "Not at their expense. I can't do that to them. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't ask to be born into a broken marriage. They didn't ask for a mother who fell in love with someone else. This is my fault. My mess. I can't make them pay for it. Michael said, so what are you saying? Emily said, I'm saying I have to try to fix my marriage. I have to try to make this work with Robert.
For them.
Michael said, even though you don't love him? Even though you'll be miserable? Emily said, yes. Michael said, what about us? Emily said, there is no us.
There can't be.
Michael said, you don't mean that. Emily said, I do.
I'm sorry.
I love you. I'll always love you. But I love my children more. Michael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I understand. Emily said, do you? Michael said, no. But I have to respect it.
Doesn't mean it doesn't destroy me.
Emily said, I know. I'm destroyed too. They stayed on the phone not speaking. Just breathing. Just being together one last time. Then Emily said, I have to go. Michael said, will I see you at work? Emily said, I'm going to request a transfer. Back to Portland maybe. Somewhere far from you. Because if I see you every day, I won't be able to do this. Michael said, okay. Emily said, goodbye, Michael. Michael said, goodbye, Emily. She hung up. 6 months later, here's where they are. Emily and Robert are still married. Barely. They're in marriage counseling twice a week. Some sessions are productive. Most are brutal. Robert is trying to forgive her. Emily is trying to be the wife he deserves. Neither of them is succeeding very well. The trust is shattered. Probably permanently. Robert checks her phone constantly. Emily doesn't blame him. She gives him all her passwords. She tells him where she's going. She texts him throughout the day. She's trying to prove that she's committed, that she chose their family, that she meant it. But Robert looks at her differently now. Like she's a stranger. Like he doesn't know her at all. Maybe he never did. Maybe that was the problem all along. The kids know something is wrong, but they don't know what. Sophie asked why Daddy sleeps in the guest room now. Emily said Daddy's back hurts and the other bed is better for it. Sophie is 7. She pretended to believe the lie. Jake is too young to notice much. He's just happy when both his parents are home. That's enough for him.
For now.
Emily sees a therapist individually too. A different one from the marriage counselor. She's finally able to be honest. To talk about the affair. To talk about the guilt. To talk about the fact that she still thinks about Michael every single day. To talk about the fact that she's not sure if she made the right choice or if she just made the safe choice. Her therapist asks her if she thinks there's a difference. Emily doesn't have an answer. She still works at the same company, but she transferred to a different department. Different floor. Different projects. She requested no overlap with Michael's team. Her request was granted. No questions asked. She sees him sometimes in the elevator, in the cafeteria, walking through the lobby. They don't speak. They just nod. Professional.
Distant.
Strangers who used to know every inch of each other's souls. It's excruciating every single time. Emily has panic attacks in her car after those encounters. Brief moments where she can't breathe and wonders if she made a terrible mistake. Then she goes home, and Sophie runs to hug her, and Jake shows her a picture he drew at school, and she remembers why she stayed. Michael and Jennifer divorced 3 months ago. It was Jennifer's choice. Michael asked her to give their marriage one more chance. He said he would end things with Emily completely. He said he would do whatever it took.
Therapy. Counseling.
Starting over. Whatever she wanted. Jennifer said no. She said the affair wasn't the problem. The affair was the symptom. Their marriage had been dead for years. They both knew it. They were both just too comfortable to admit it. She said she didn't want to spend the rest of her life with someone who was capable of falling in love with someone else. She said she deserved better. Michael couldn't argue with that. So they divided their assets. They sold the house. They signed the papers. It was civil. Almost friendly. 2 people who had been business partners officially dissolving the partnership. Michael lives alone now. A small apartment downtown. 1 bedroom. Minimal furniture. He hasn't bothered to decorate. It doesn't feel like home. It feels like a waiting room. He's in therapy too. Finally being honest about everything. About the loneliness in his marriage. About the affair. About Emily. About the fact that he let her go and doesn't know if he should have fought harder. About the fact that he's 40 years old and single and starting over and terrified that he'll never feel about anyone the way he felt about her. His therapist asks him if he's tried to contact Emily. Michael says no.
His therapist asks why.
Michael says because she made her choice. And he has to respect it, even if it kills him. He still works at the same company.
Same team.
Same projects. He requested no transfer, because where would he even go? This job is all he has left. He sees Emily sometimes. Those moments are torture.
Pure torture.
He wants to talk to her. To ask if she's happy. To ask if she thinks about him. To ask if she regrets her choice. To ask if there's any chance, any possibility, that someday they could try again. But he doesn't. He just nods and keeps walking. Because what else is there to do?
2 weeks ago, something happened.
Emily was having a particularly bad day. Robert had accused her of texting someone during dinner. She wasn't. She was checking work email. But he didn't believe her. They had a fight. Emily ended up crying in the bathroom while the kids watched TV. She felt like she was drowning. Like she was trapped in a life that would never feel right again. Like she had made a sacrifice that was noble, but also slowly destroying her. So she did something she knew she shouldn't do. She opened her laptop. She drafted an email. She addressed it to Michael. She sat there for an hour writing and deleting and writing again. Finally, she sent it. The email said this: Michael, I need you to know something. That morning when I decided not to meet you, when I decided to stay with Robert and try to save my marriage, I sat in my car in the hotel parking lot and I imagined our life together. And it was beautiful. I imagined us waking up together, making coffee, laughing about stupid things, building something real. I imagined feeling chosen, feeling wanted, feeling alive. But then I imagined Sophie's face when I told her mommy was leaving. I imagined Jake asking when I was coming home. I imagined missing their childhoods while I built a new life with you.
And I realized something.
We didn't fall in love. We fell into an escape plan. We fell into a fantasy where we could run away from our problems instead of facing them. And maybe that fantasy would have been beautiful for a while. But it was built on wreckage. On broken promises, on our children's pain, on the destruction of 2 families. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't build my happiness on that foundation. I don't know if I made the right choice. I don't know if staying with Robert was brave or cowardly. I don't know if I'll ever feel truly happy again. But I know I can look my kids in the eye. I know I'm here for them. And that has to be enough. I hope you're okay. I hope you've found some peace. I hope you don't hate me. And I hope that someday, maybe years from now, we can both look back on this and understand that we were 2 lonely people who found each other at the wrong time. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for making me feel alive. Thank you for not fighting me on my decision, even though I know it hurt you. I'll always love you. But I love my children more. And I hope you can forgive me for that. Please don't respond to this email. I just needed you to know. Emily. Michael read that email 17 times. He cried the first 3 times. Then he just sat with it.
Processing.
Understanding. Grieving. He wanted to respond. He wanted to tell her that he understood. That he didn't hate her. That he respected her choice even though it broke his heart. That he hoped she found happiness even if it wasn't with him. That he would always love her too. But she had asked him not to respond. So he didn't. Instead, he printed the email. He keeps it in his wallet now. He's not sure why. Maybe because it's closure. Maybe because it's a reminder. Maybe because it's proof that what they had was real, even if it couldn't last. Maybe because sometimes love isn't about getting the person. It's about understanding why you can't have them and choosing to love them anyway. Choosing to want their happiness even when it doesn't include you. Choosing to respect their choice even when it destroys you. That's love too. Maybe the purest kind. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to be honest.
Not with me.
With yourself. If you were Emily, sitting in that car at 3 in the morning, knowing you had to choose between the love of your life and your children, what would you have done? Would you have gotten on that plane? Would you have started over? Would you have chosen passion over stability? Freedom over responsibility? Your happiness over their innocence? Or would you have done what Emily did? Would you have chosen the harder path? The path of staying and trying and sacrificing and wondering for the rest of your life what might have been? And if you were Michael, would you have fought harder? Would you have tried to convince her? Would you have shown up at her door and made some grand gesture? Or would you have done what he did? Would you have let her go? Would you have respected her choice even though it meant losing the only person who had made you feel truly alive in over a decade? There's no right answer here. That's what makes this story so devastating. Emily and Michael weren't bad people. They weren't villains. They were just two human beings who were lonely and found each other at the worst possible time. They made choices. Some good, some terrible, some brave, some cowardly, just like all of us. So drop your answer in the comments. What would you do? And be honest. Because maybe this isn't just Emily and Michael's story. Maybe it's a mirror showing us something about ourselves we don't want to see. Maybe it's asking us questions we don't want to answer. Questions about marriage and love and sacrifice and happiness and whether we can really have it all, or if that's just a lie we tell ourselves to make the compromise bearable. Next time, I'll tell you about the couple who made the opposite choice, who left their families, who ran away together, who chose passion over everything else. And I'll tell you exactly how that decision destroyed them in ways they never imagined. Subscribe so you don't miss it. This is real life, where love doesn't conquer all, where right and wrong aren't clear, where good people make terrible choices, and where sometimes the hardest choice is the only one that matters. If you or someone you know is struggling in their relationship, please seek help.
Talk to a counselor. Talk to a therapist. Talk to someone.
You're not alone. Thank you for watching.